Hey, what is going on everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and today I'm going to be showing you all how you can jailbreak your Mega SG console. For those who do not know, this is essentially a clone Genesis, and like I talked about in my previous video, one of the best clone Genesis consoles out there. It does allow you to hook up to native Mega CD or Sega CD hardware. You can of course use regular Mega Drive or Sega Genesis cartridges within the console itself, and there is compatibility for other cartridges. Some of it is now, some of it is going to be coming out later. One of them being Sega Master System, you can actually get an adapter and run them on here. However, in my previous video where I talked about my thoughts and feelings towards this as well as my experiences, I did talk about a jailbreak or a custom firmware, so to speak. So this video is going to show you all how you can install it. Thankfully, it's quite simple to do. Big shout out to SmokeMonster who ended up releasing this jailbreak firmware for the system. Now, just level set, this jailbreak will allow you to play your cartridge-based games off of the SD card. So this will allow you to play Genesis, Mega Drive, Colecovision, Game Gear, Sega Master System, and SG 1000 games off of your SD card or micro SD card if you have an adapter. Keep in mind that this is not a perfect solution, so that means that you're not going to have 100% compatibility with every single game in these console libraries, but you are going to be able to play a vast majority of them, which is great. For anybody asking about the Sega CD, you will not be able to play Sega CD games using your SD card. So unfortunately, if that's what you're looking for, this jailbreak is not for you. The only way to do that right now from any type of micro SD card storage is going to be using the Terra Onion Mega SD if you want to go that route. Otherwise, you will still need a physical Sega CD attached to your Mega SG, and you will still need discs in order to play your Sega CD games if you use this method. This will allow you to run other BIOS on your Sega CD, which I will get into, but this is not going to let you play Sega CD games off of the SD card. Now, the final omission is 32X. Presently, there is no out-of-box solution to play 32X games on a Mega SG, and you cannot do that with this jailbreak either. However, it has been announced that 32X support is supposed to be coming in the future to the Mega SG along with the DAC. It has been confirmed that you will need a custom cable and the DAC in order to play your 32X games. So in a future custom firmware, once there is 32X support built into the official firmware, we might see it in the custom firmware or the jailbreak. I can't speak on that right now, I can only speculate, but that's what I can tell you all at the moment. So now that we have all of that out of the way, if you have your Mega SG, your SD card, and a PC nearby, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, the most important thing, you are going to need the jailbreak firmware for your Mega SG. All the links that I'm going to be showing will be down below in the description, but what you can do is from here, there is some great short documentation which includes this, so if you want to get any further reading on this, you're more than welcome to do so. And on top of that, right here, there is a huge guide for these firmwares, which you can find in documentation, and you can download the latest PDF. And it is just a whole wealth and treasure trove of information if there's anything that you need more detail on when you are messing around with this later. But anyways, what you want to do is on the main page here, you can just go over to Releases, and here you can download the MSG JB file system zip, as well as the MSG firmware bin file. Just go ahead and download the latest one. If you'd like to, you can also download the MD5 file, which is just a file hash to ensure that your firmware is proper, that it's not corrupted during download. I can show you how to check that as well too, but those are the files that we're going to need. The next thing I would also recommend downloading is the stock firmware, just in case you want to go back to stock and just in case anything might go wrong, or for whatever reason you need to go back to a stock firmware, it's safe and good to keep that as a backup. For this, you can go to Analogue's official site, go to Menu, and Support. And then from here, go to Mega SG Firmware Update, which will take you to the latest one. And if you go all the way to the bottom, you'll be able to download the latest one from here. The last thing, just in case you are using a large SD card, would be FAT32 formats, because this cannot be FAT or FAT16 or exFAT formats. This has to be FAT32. So if you can't easily format this within Windows, you can just download FAT32 format by clicking right here on this photo and downloading the file. So over here, I'm going to show you my folder structure. First of all, I put all of my jailbreak files within my Jailbreak Firmware folder. For my stock firmware, I just kept it here, stock firmware. GUI format I put here, and the official unofficial guide I have right here downloaded just in case we need that. That is some great reading if you want to go through it or if you have any specific questions, so I can definitely recommend checking that out. But the first thing we'll need is we will need our SD card at this point. So first of all, format your SD card, but make sure you back up anything off of it. The only file we want on here is we just want the firmware file. And another thing to note is when you upgrade your firmware on your system, it is going to wipe your settings. So any specific settings you have, you might want to note down right now because it will just reset them to defaults. So what we can do here is we can grab our USB drive, format it, and here, if you have FAT32, it's pretty simple. You just pick FAT32 and your default allocation size and start, format. That's about it. If you do not have FAT32 as an option, what you can do is use GUI format. So for this, right click, run it as administrator, and then grab your SD card. Make sure it is the same one you're using. So mine is drive H. You can keep this the same, quick format is fine. Hit start and that. And now I want to show this. If you get this error, it's because you might have a window open. You're either in the drive or you have something that's looking at it. So you have to close out of any windows that are utilizing that, and then you can actually format it. So once you do that, it's all formatted. You can click close. And at that point, since I have formatted this twice, I'm really not too worried about anything. So now let's copy over the firmware itself. For this, you can go to where you downloaded the firmware, copy out your bin file, and just paste it on the root of your SD card right there. And if you want to check the MD5 hash of it, there's a few different ways that you can do this. For this, you can use a MD5 checker such as like MD5 Checker, but what I've actually been using recently has been just online MD5 checkers. They seem to work well enough for me, and I'll put one down below in the description if you want to do this just to be safe. But what you can do here is you can grab your MD5 file, and there's a few ways you can check the hash without any additional software. The first one is you can just right click and edit it with something such as Notepad or Notepad++, and this is your hash, which you can copy out. The second method is literally just opening it within a browser. So what you can do is drag and drop it into its own tab in something like Chrome, and because it's essentially a text file, it gives you the hash right there, so you can just copy that out. Now within online MD5, you can click choose file. Make sure you navigate to your flash drive, double click this, and it will give you a checksum here, which you can then verify and compare. And if it gives you that green check, then that means that your file has downloaded and copied to your flash drive with no issue. That's just to be safe to prevent any type of corruption on the firmware. Now, with your firmware file being the only thing verified and sitting on your SD card, all you need to do is right click, safely eject your SD card. Now remove it from your PC, turn off your Mega SG if you haven't already, and plug it in. Again, be aware that this is going to reset your settings to default when you install this update, so to speak. So make sure you have any specific things you have set up noted down somewhere, and then once you have your system off, plug in your SD card, turn on your system, and when you first turned on, it's going to be flashing red quite fast. Then it's going to be flashing at a medium speed, and it's going to be flashing red again. This whole time, nothing is going to be showing up on your display, so that is totally fine. Just put your SD card in your system, turn it on, and wait a few minutes. When your system actually boots up into its OS, that means that the firmware update is done. Alright, now once your system has restarted into the menu here, congratulations, that means you are now running the jailbroken firmware. So for this, I'll go ahead and show you. You can immediately tell if it was successful because it's going to give you a new cores option. So since we have done this successfully, what we have to do next is turn off the system and remove the SD card. When you have this plugged back in, just grab your one file and delete it because we no longer need that. Now you can go back over to your folders, and again, if you ever want to install stock firmware, you just do that exact same process, but with this file. You can only keep one firmware file on your SD card at a time, and when you boot up with a firmware file on your SD card, it will update, which is why I wanted you to delete that. But now that we have all that done, we can continue on here. So the next thing we can do is go to Jailbreak Firmware, and right click and extract this MSG JB file system folder. Go in here, go into SD card, grab all of these folders. You don't need the README, although it just tells you that this is how you organize your stuff. Copy all the folders and then paste them into your SD card right here. And now this is quite self-explanatory. Coleco, that's where you can put your Colecovision games. Your Genesis, this is where you put your Genesis and Mega Drive games. GG, this is where you put your Game Gear games. And SMS, this is for your SG-1000 and Sega Master System games. Now there is a BIOS folder here as well, and this BIOS folder is for the Sega Cd Bios, if you're wanting to load up different regions of Sega Cd Bios. I will show you how you can do that. I personally have not had success with it, but just in case you want to try it out yourself and you might have more success than me, then so be it. Although it is best to use specific BIOS files as noted by the instructions. So if you have a Model 1 Sega CD, stick to Model 1 BIOS. If you have a Model 2, stick to Model 2. And then if you have a US system, you can get the European and Japanese BIOS for that system. You don't need the USA BIOS on there. There are some multi-region BIOS, and it is advised not to use those. So that's why I'm saying just get the individual BIOS if you are going to put them on here. I personally do have a few games and such that I want to put on here, so I'm just going to transfer them over, then eject my SD card, pop it into my system, and turn the Mega SG on. Alright, so once you are back at your system, you can go down to Cores, and from here you can select whichever one you are wanting. So I want to load up a Genesis game, so I'm going to press A on Genesis, and it will bring up this warning here, which of course it says that you can disable it within System and Menu Options, although this just shows you how to save your games when you're playing them. So what you can do is press B to continue, and at this point we can just go ahead, pick any of these games, and begin playing. Alright, so now that we've gotten some game time in, let's say that we've gotten far enough where we had to save either automatically or manually. What you can do is press down and start at the same time, and in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, if it had to save, it will tell you that it has saved, or it will say saving and give you a percentage. On here, because this game does not have saving, it does not have that available, but from there you can go through and look at the rest of the games if you want to switch up to something else, or you can just press B, completely exit out of here, and this is just giving you a warning about saving and such on this if you want to check this out. Just make sure if you are saving your progress on these ROM files, you do press down and start after you save, and then to actually save it to a file. But I'm going to exit out of that, and that's about it. So if we want to pick any other cores, for example, let's go ahead and do SMS. Here we go. And let's go ahead and pick Hang On. Alright, so after that terrible playthrough of it there, again, we can just do the same thing by pressing down and start, and check out anything else. Now, one thing I do want to show you all is that not all games, as I said, are going to work. So one that I know will not work for me is, for example, Virtua Racing. I did put this on here because, let's say we can try it out, and that's about all that happens. So this is one of those games that does have some specific chips in the cartridge that are going to be required. So if I put the physical cartridge in here, it will work just fine, but if we're playing it using this method, it is not going to work. So that's just one thing to know of there. Not all games are going to work, but again, for a Jailbreak custom firmware, this is still pretty nice. Now, for anybody who has physical Sega CD hardware attached to their Mega SG, this is another feature that is available. Now, I would like to know in the comment section if anybody has been successfully able to utilize this, because I will be showing you all at least what this is documented on here. I personally have not had much success using it with my methods here, but what you can do is you can spoof your region, so to speak, on your Sega CD. The Sega CD does not have copy protection, but it does have region protection, and that is pretty simple to set up here. Within the menu, when you bring this up, what you can do is go to Settings, go down to your Core Options, and then select Use Replacement CD Bios. Press A to tick that, and now you can say Select New BIOS File, and assuming that you have already put some BIOS here, you can pick which one is available. So I'm going to press A on this, and it does say when using a replacement CD BIOS, auto region detection must be turned on in the hardware menu. So what we can do for that is go back again. Here we'll need to go to System, Hardware, and make sure auto region detection has been enabled. This is enabled by default, thankfully. But now with all that done, we can go to Save Clear Settings, and let's save that. So now if we end up rebooting into this again, we should be able to have some luck. Check this out. And check this out, we are now using the Mega CD BIOS, which is the Japanese BIOS available here. So using that, you're able to change that around. Again, I might need to play with some different BIOS and such, but that is how you can do a BIOS replacement, so to speak, on your Sega CD. Note that this does not make any changes to the Sega CD hardware itself. It is all just settings and files on the SD card, so don't worry about this reflashing your Sega CD or manipulating it like that. This is just loading another BIOS, but the Sega CD itself is still untouched. And there we go. As you can see, we have now successfully jailbroken the Mega SG. So congratulations, you should be on that SmokeMonster custom firmware. I've noticed that SmokeMonster is pretty consistent about getting these updated, meaning that whenever a new stock firmware ends up coming out from the guys over at Analogue, SmokeMonster normally takes that firmware, performs his magic on it, and is able to get a updated version of the jailbreak out pretty fast. Again, these are just taking the regular stock firmware and injecting a few more options and features, and you know, some things like this on here. Now again, compatibility is not going to be perfect by any means, like I showed you all with Virtua Racing. However, a lot of it is there, and a lot of people have been comparing this to having a EverDrive. So just imagine, so to speak, getting a EverDrive on your SD card as opposed to going out and purchasing the EverDrive hardware itself. It is a nice upside because you just have to flash a firmware file. The downside is, of course, you can only use this on the Mega SG. But if all you plan on playing on, or if you're primarily playing your games on your Mega SG, then that's really not going to be that much of an issue. Honestly, the only physical type of flash card I would be interested in getting at this point now would be the Mega SD, because that's going to have 100% compatibility from what I'm seeing, and on top of that, it does allow you to play Sega CD games off of a micro SD card without having the Sega CD hardware, so that would be really nice how I can just kind of save and preserve my Sega CD on the side. But that's about it. Anyways, this is Mr. Mario signing off. Thank you all for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, a like would absolutely be appreciated, and if you didn't like it, a dislike is fine as well too.